We are glad to have you here today. And Sarah Purpura is going to talk to us about diabetes prevention and making a change together. She's a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. Sarah, we're looking forward to hearing from you and seeing what we can learn to make some change.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Like Gretchen said, I'm Sarah. I'm hailing from the Midwest today. So hello to all near and far. I am both a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. I have been a dietitian for about 10 years and done diabetes education for about half that time. So November is Diabetes Awareness Month, so I'm very excited to get to bring you some information about diabetes during this time. The theme of my presentation today is about making change together. So I want to tell you a little bit about why I chose that theme and the inspiration that I've had over time. Let me just make sure I can move these slides forward here. Awesome. Okay. So why this theme of togetherness and community? So I got inspiration from a couple of places along the way, and one of those main sources of inspiration was my patients, the people that I get to work with. And I had a couple patients do really cool things with the information that we talked about in our sessions, like go and give a presentation to their family members about prediabetes and diabetes and the things that they can do to take care of their health. I have other patients who have invited their friends into their change process along the way. So, recruiting friends to go to the gym with them, to exercise with them, to try new healthy eating habits together. So, I was really inspired by the changes that I was seeing being made among the people that I work with. I'm also an avid reader and audiobook listener, and I've been listening to a book about social networks and our connectedness. And I was really taken with this idea of this third degree connection between friends and relationships. So we're not only influenced by what our direct connections, like a friend, does, but we're also influenced by what their friends do. So when it comes to health behaviors like pursuing weight loss, quitting smoking. It's kind of interesting that we can be inspired to make change by people we don't even know. So I want to focus on the power of community. To start, let's just talk about a basic definition of what diabetes is. This is where I start a lot of my consults with my patients, is just finding out what they know about diabetes in general. So a very basic definition of diabetes is when the levels of sugar are higher in the bloodstream over long periods of time. So the emphasis there is on the long periods of time, because when any person eats, whether they have diabetes or not, it's typical for the blood sugar to rise. When blood sugar rises, and that's related to foods that are starchy like carbohydrates, carbohydrates encompass dairy foods, fruits, rice, pasta, potatoes. So those are things that make our blood sugar rise. When that rise in blood sugar happens, that communicates to the body that it's time to send out a hormone called insulin. And that hormone comes from your pancreas. The pancreas sits right at the top of the digestive system. And so that insulin is released. And insulin's job is to go to the cells in a person's body, tell the cells to open their doors and let that sugar inside. So that's how your body gets energy. When you eat foods that turn into sugar, sugar ends up in the bloodstream, the body releases insulin, and insulin moves that sugar into your body's cells. What is happening when a person has prediabetes or diabetes is that insulin is not working as effectively. So it's having trouble communicating to that person's cells. Therefore, more sugar stays back in the bloodstream. So after going over a definition of diabetes, the next thing I typically talk about with my patients is how does your doctor know that you have diabetes? Or how do you know that you have diabetes? Thinking back to that community aspect, many of us may know someone in our families, in our friend groups that has diabetes or prediabetes. And so oftentimes when people share anecdotes about their experience, symptoms that they knew that they needed to go see their doctor about, for high blood sugar, that could be things like blurry vision, increased thirst, increased hunger, feeling really tired or fatigued. Those things may have prompted them to seek out further investigation regarding their health and their blood sugars. But what we know to be true when we're talking about diabetes and prediabetes, so here I'm describing more so type 2 diabetes. We'll get into the definitions of type 1 versus type 2. But type 2 diabetes and prediabetes can be progressive conditions. So a person may not know that anything is changing with their blood sugars. Their body might not give them signals that things are changing. So one thing that your doctor can do to screen for your risk for diabetes and prediabetes or the presence of either of those conditions is by looking at your blood work. And that specific blood test is called the A1C. So this might feel very familiar nowadays because in a lot of our commercials for diabetes medications or diabetes devices, you're hearing this term A1C and people working on lowering their A1C. So what that term refers to is a blood test where we can look at a person's average blood sugars over 3 months' time. Essentially what's happening is we're taking a picture of the red blood cells, and the lifespan of a red blood cell is about 3 months, and we're measuring the amount of sugar that is attached to those red blood cells. So this is a blood test that can diagnose diabetes and prediabetes, but also help a person monitor it over time. The chart on the side of the page shows that the A1C is given as a percentage. And next to that percentage, if you like to look at your lab work on like an online portal where your doctor releases those results, if you have an A1C done, it's given as a percentage, but then you'll also get another number that tells you what that means about your average blood sugars over 3 months' time. For a person with diabetes, they may already be checking their blood sugar. So that just helps give a starting point about where blood sugars have been on average. I want to point out that there are several different types of diabetes. Often we know about type 1 and type 2 diabetes. I mentioned that prediabetes and type 2 diabetes are progressive conditions, meaning they often develop over time. Type 1 diabetes is a condition where a person's body does not produce any insulin. So it's an autoimmune condition, meaning those cells in their pancreas have shut themselves off. So a person with type 1 diabetes does need to take insulin for the duration of their lifetime. Often we know those two types of diabetes, but there is a whole spectrum between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So a couple of these other terms I have on here, this LADA is talking about a latent autoimmune diabetes, where a person develops type 1 diabetes much later in life. So often we associate type 1 diabetes with being diagnosed very early or in childhood, but a person can develop type 1 diabetes much later in life. Same with mature onset diabetes of the young, so that's MODY there, and that's when we tend to find type 2-like diabetes in very young children. Diabetes can develop based on medication a person has to take, so maybe they need steroids for a particular condition, and that can cause blood sugar to rise over time. And then diabetes can develop secondary to other medical conditions. If a person has a history of conditions with their pancreas, like pancreatic cancer, removal of part of that pancreas may induce diabetes, or conditions like cystic fibrosis can also sometimes lead to diabetes. So the important thing to know there is there's a lot beyond just type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So many of us know someone that has diabetes or is at risk for diabetes. These people may be in our family, in our community. Nearly 40% of the US population has prediabetes. If you look at the US population over 65, that rises to half the population. Prediabetes is defined as having an A1C between 5.7 and 6.4%. 6.5% or higher is the diagnostic criteria for diabetes. So greater than 10% of the population in the United States has a diagnosis of diabetes. And those numbers are rising all the time. So this is something we really want to pay attention to. And that's why it's so important to talk about prevention and how we can do that with our communities because diabetes is so widespread. So let's talk about the risk factors specifically for type 2 diabetes. The first risk factors I have outlined here are things that we can't change. We can't change our age. Every day we're getting older, and aging does put us at higher risk for several chronic conditions. So, going back to that screening and the blood tests, A1C and checking blood sugar in your doctor's office, that's really something that most of the population should be doing is checking their risk for prediabetes or diabetes. We can't change our age. We also can't change who our family is or our ethnic background, and those things also can contribute to a higher risk of specifically type 2 diabetes. Other personal or family health conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, they also put a person at higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes. The next slide, I want to talk about the things that we can change. And the things that we can change have a positive impact on all of these things that right now feels like we can't make change to. So these are the non-modifiable risk factors. Let's talk about the modifiable risk factors. And this is where the conversation starts with most of my patients are what are the things that I can help them and encourage them in changing that are going to affect their health over the long term. So what we can change is our lifestyle habits. And there are two main areas of our lifestyle that really impact our risk and help a person manage the condition of diabetes. And that is how we eat and our physical activity levels. And in changing these things, we can change our family's health legacy and our family's future. So making changes that inspire others makes a big difference. Think about family in the broadest sense of the term. So who do you consider to be your family? Who do you spend your time around? Who is your chosen family? Who are the people in your sphere of influence? Couple questions for reflection here, just things I want to get you thinking about. Who in your life could also benefit from some healthy change or some healthy living? This might be a hard conversation to start because a lot of times in our families and our communities, our health decisions and health conditions are very private. So here you might have to be the icebreaker if these are things that are important to you or maybe that you're working on managing, sharing that with the people that you care about might be a great first step. Who helps provide accountability in your life when you want to change something, whether it's about your health or just a goal you're reaching for in life? Who do you go to for that? Who would provide accountability? Who would be a great support? So, who cheers you on? Who would you want to take with you on this health change journey? And then think about your why. Why are you making change? Who are you making change for? You are important to your community, to the people in your family. So, making these changes to protect your health for the future is bigger than just receiving the personal benefit. It also provides benefit to the people that depend on you. So let's talk about eating habits first. As a dietitian, this is my domain. So a lot of different professions can be diabetes educators. That's an additional credential that you can get in addition to being a nurse or a pharmacist. Counselors can also become diabetes educators. For those of us who are also dietitians, this is one of our main areas of focus is helping people make changes to their eating habits. Let's admit this is hard because a lot of the habits that we develop around food and eating are ingrained from a very young age. And so unraveling and readjusting some of these things later in life is tough. We just have to admit that making change is difficult. Let's talk about why nutrition is important to us. So, just some things to think about. Our nutrition has social implications. A lot of times we grow up or we currently share food with the people in our communities, whether that's family or friends. So, it has a social aspect. A lot of our social activities revolve around eating food together. Food is cultural. It reflects who we are culturally, the culture that we share with others, the places that we live. So food has cultural importance. It's pleasurable. We should enjoy eating. That's an important aspect of what and how we eat. And then it's nutritious. So we need food because it's the fuel for our bodies. Going back to that concept of what is diabetes, we learned about the sugar coming into our blood is how we get energy that fuels our brain and all of our muscle cells. So it's super important to get vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein, all the things that the body needs from the foods that we eat. Think about what you would add here. What else does food and eating and nutrition mean to you? So, how to make change with friends and family? Cook together. Oftentimes, what I hear as a barrier to meal prep or having healthy food accessible is just the time that it takes to make it. And oftentimes, these are things that people tend to do alone grocery shopping, cooking. This would be a great thing to invite other people into if you like to meal prep. Have your friends come over with food to contribute and their to go containers so you can make meals together for the week. Have a party, invite people in and have a theme, make it a vegetable theme, make it a local food or a seasonal food theme, or nothing that comes out of a bag or a box. Get cookbooks from your library. This is a great place to start if you're just looking for healthy inspiration. There are so many things to choose from. It can also help you try foods outside of your comfort zone. When it comes to those with families, think about even getting your young children involved. I think kids can be part of the food preparation process from a very young age. And maybe if you have a toddler, that doesn't mean handing them the paring knife, but that could mean having them in the kitchen and having them be part of that decision making process. So rather than having them decide whether to eat a vegetable or not, it's which vegetable do you want to eat and how do we want to cook it? So get them involved in that process and then be brave for them. So if they're hesitant to try something new, watching their parents or adults in their life make changes, be brave, try things that they typically wouldn't like, that inspires them to do so as well. So that's food and what goes into our bodies, which is super important. The next aspect is staying in motion. So we know there's a direct connection between the food that we eat and many health conditions, including diabetes, especially when it comes to things like carbohydrates and sugar being one of those carbohydrates. That has a direct connection with our blood sugar levels. Where exercise comes in is when the body is in motion and you're doing both aerobic activity and strength training activity. You're working on muscles, you're working on the cardiovascular system, your heart. And so those kinds of things can make the body more sensitive to the action of insulin. Going back to that concept from earlier in the presentation, What's happening with insulin in the body when a person has pre or diabetes is that insulin is struggling to work. You might have heard a term called insulin resistance, and that is something that can be addressed through exercise. So take inventory of your social activities. What do you typically do with your friends? Is it more sedentary? Are there things you could do together, like joining a gym together, taking a fitness class together, just incorporating a walk into a typical social activity? Recruit your coworkers. If you have breaks in your day that you can do a quick walk over lunch, that's a great way to build community. And then I love these two concepts. In Italy, what they do after a meal is they take a passeggiata, and that is a word that means a walk, essentially after a meal to the center of town to be in community with their neighbors, but they're also getting some movement. You might have also heard more popular here in the US is a fart walk, is taking a fart walk after a meal. When you're filling up on all those vegetables, those are really good for you, but they might cause a little gas. So going out, moving your feet and moving your bowels is really good to do after a meal and saves your loved ones from expelling that gas at home after the meal instead. So enjoy a walk after a meal. All right, so why is this important to do together? The other thing that we want to pay attention to is that we're lonelier than we've ever been. In a survey that was done at the beginning of last year, 1 in 3 Americans reported feelings of loneliness at least once a week. Loneliness and social engagement are also modifiable risk factors. A decrease in our social connection can create an increased risk for chronic conditions like heart disease. So, if we can be making more social connections or finding ways to stay connected with our community, that in turn reduces the risk for chronic conditions like diabetes and heart disease. So, where to start? How do you help others in your sphere of influence? We have so many platforms to share our stories nowadays. Keep track of what you're doing, share that with others, put that online, tell your friends. Could also be that your friends are just waiting for an invitation. If this is a journey that you're ready to take, whether it's fitness, weight loss, improving other aspects of your health, the people around you might just be waiting for an invitation to come alongside you. So, helpful personal tips and things that you can share with people that you know. If you don't know your risk for diabetes, you can ask your doctor about having your blood sugar tested, specifically doing that A1C test. And then you can also meet with a dietitian. Check in with your insurance, see what coverage looks like for a specialist visit with a dietitian, and seek out a place near you that has dietitian support. So that might just mean starting with your doctor sending a referral to see a nutrition professional. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Sarah, thank you for all the great information. I appreciate it.